great overview for a law that's sort of the tip of the iceberg. So now let's get into the iceberg. So I'm sure that you guys have questions. Super. So, you know what, I'll get the ones in the front. I usually do that. If you want to get the ones in the back. So introduce your name and your organization.
My name is Sue Hope. I'm a signage consultant and I work for Delcam, an engineering company. In a previous iteration I had my own signage consultancy and I worked with CNIB quite long term and actually worked with Morgan. I have a particular concern myself about how the built environment is not happening. Can you give us any idea of how, when, and how much? Because without teeth, a lot of people will avoid using it.
Yeah, thank you for all that. As I said, the Premier in September committed to the Active Built Environment. The government is still considering it is quite, be still standard. The Standard Development Committee, this is the 50% obligated organisations and 50% persons with disabilities committee that Darren was talking about earlier, submitted a standard in the summer of 2010. It was about 400 pages almost, so quite technical requirements. We're working with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Council who are responsible for buildings, and we've got recommendations that we're working on with the government for their decision. It should be decided on shortly.
There's another concern as well. I'm hoping it's going to be mandatory. The non-compliance issue is huge in the built environment. I've been working with accessibility since the early 90s, and people avoid simply because it's costly and it's necessary in order to make accessibility available for all. The economic benefits, if it doesn't have teeth, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, sure. And I guess the teeth of it is taking bread and butter at the moment, so I'm going to tell you that it will have to. We will, as I said, be looking to group organisations paying it first, but we do have the authority and measures in place to be able to move beyond that. We are working with partners across the province and the world to constantly innovate the best way to inspect and enforce a regulatory regime such as this. It's actually been incredibly interesting given we're first in the world to go this broad on accessibility, but clearly so many others have already made great inroads in the built environment already. So in that area, we've got a little bit more inter-jurisdiction best practice to learn from and to really replicate where buildings happen.
My name is Kathy Blackburn, and I work for the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport. And I'm a museum advisor with for community museums across the province. And we have just been looking at reassessing compliance with some of the ministry's heritage standards, 3 of which address accessibility issues. And one of the things that I notice as a problem for the approximately 65% of these museums that are municipal is that they cite the municipality's accessibility policy, but that quite often there's no reflection of how that is addressed within the museum. And I know many of my museum colleagues weren't at the table when the municipality drafted their plan, and often these plans have no recognition of public spaces such as exhibitions and what they don't do or don't support. In 2004-2005, a colleague of mine had hired Diane Gallagher to develop a resource on accessibility in museums, and unfortunately that didn't get published. But as we're trying with the feedback on the standards to direct colleagues to resources that will help
do have a requirement, as do all organizations now, to create accessibility plans and to be integrated regulation. And I think that's really where the museum, the public spaces would come into play. And I'm interested in exploring and having a conversation perhaps afterwards about that in terms of municipal museums and perhaps the role of the Ontario Museum Association would play in advocating for that involvement in that planning process.
Okay, Carolyn, we're going to take this question.
I'm with Belcan Corporation, Diana Hamilton, and also a board member of Blue Michael. And I'm I guess asking as an architect more than anything else. So to navigate through the standards and guidelines and new legislation, we're ultimately governed by the Ontario Building Code. So, and the building code gets rewritten every 5 years, and so the question is if legislation comes out, then will that supersede Building Code Part 8?
So, great question, thanks. So we're working in municipal areas. The indoor building-related aspects of the accessible built environment we will be integrating into the building code. Should government decide that's what they're going to do. That's certainly what we've publicly been looking at for a long time now. The public spaces aspect is likely not going to go in the building code because we don't want to infuriate more than we already have to. So we are looking at ways to streamline it, but make it completely clear and understandable for everybody. Building related things will go, and we'll sync up a building code.
And maybe if I could just add one piece, just on the theme of working our way through all the intricacies of the regulations, the ADR requirements, the integrated regulation, and those in the customer service standard. I don't want to steal Ben's thunder because his team's been working on this, but we're very close to launching an online tool we're calling The Wizard, where you just need to visit our website, which was posted up there on ontario.ca/accesson. You answer a few. We didn't practice this, honestly. You just answer a few fairly easy questions about the nature of your gallery or museum or institution, the number of employees, the kind of services you provide, and so on. And at the end, it will spit out a chart, basically listing each of the standards and your requirements and the deadlines that you'll need to meet those requirements. And it makes it look a lot less daunting. Suddenly you realize, oh, actually we need to do 15 things over the next 15 years. That's not quite so bad. And then we'll link to the guidelines that Ben referred to earlier, as well as the free tools and resources that are being populated online. So it's truly your roadmap to the next 13 years of accessibility planning.
Great, you have a question, Pat?
Hi, my name is Jen. I currently work at the Toronto International Festival, but prior to that, I worked at a variety of smaller arts institutions. And I know that resourcing for supporting these initiatives is a big issue, especially if you're from a smaller organization. And I love that slide you had up earlier about what it's going to look like in 2025. But given the resourcing question, I was just wondering, one challenge I find is you can't do everything all at once. So one thing, looking at the website before this conference, I was thinking about is how do you prioritize what you do first, and what should your criteria be for deciding what to tackle first and the resources in the moment?
Okay, so I think obviously the regulatory requirements, if you have to comply with providing ultimate formats by 2015, 16, 17, depending on your organisation size, clearly the legal element of it is going to set some priorities. But Darren, and I'm going to hand it over to you here, is producing how-to guides that are going to really, within that legal framework, give you a sense of how to tackle things step by step. And it's a really good tool to help you make it easier. So maybe you want to do that.
So a good example would be those two emergency-related requirements Ben spoke to earlier that came into effect as of January 1st of this year. So one of those is if you have emergency evacuation plans or public safety plans, there's a requirement to provide those in accessible format upon request. So we have about a, I think it's under 10-page guide to figuring that out. So taking a look at what kind kinds of information you already have publicly available within your organization that TIF produces, what format it is currently in, and then some potential alternatives for offering that. And we also give advice on how to build accessibility in from the get-go, which isn't necessarily prescribed in regulation. It is the smart thing to do. And I saw Yuda from OCAD University floating around. A couple of years ago, we partnered with OCAD University. She's back. We partnered with OCAD University to develop a series of guides that help all of us who use desktop computers on a regular basis to build accessibility into our work day to day. So if you're using word processing, spreadsheets, or presentation software, whether you're using MS Office, what did we have back in 2003? I'm not sure. Or you moved on to Google Docs or Apple, whatever Apple has. We have resources there, so we create accessibility. So imagine if you had brochures that are beautifully mocked up, graphically designed, and so on. You did those in Word to begin with, and somebody said, oh, I need an evacuation brochure in an accessible format. Well, if you did it accessibly from the beginning, you already have it in perhaps plain text or Microsoft Word, and you just hand that out.
I have a question about 2025. And sorry, my name is Michael Wallace, and I'm with the Theatre Museum. And you have a fabulous website, and I don't think it's very accessible. How do I find out how to make my website or our website accessible?
I'm looking at that basically, to build a website, you either need to be an IT expert, contract with an IT expert, or use an off-the-shelf package that does it all for you. Clearly, there are things that you can and can't do with each of those three areas. If you either are an IT expert or contract with an IT expert, if they can build a website, they can build an accessible website. There is an international standard called Wicca. Yuta is an absolute expert on it. She might talk about it later. Anyway, IT experts, they can read it, they can do it, no problem. Increasingly, the companies that produce off-the-shelf programs are building accessibility into those programs so that you wouldn't even know that you're using it, creating it, whatever. They're certainly not perfect, and you will not be wholly accessible using one of those. The regulation does provide caveats within it for organisations, certainly small organisations that don't have the wherewithal to contract out with IT experts. There are caveats in the regulation that will consider your inability to be accessible in those circumstances. But if you want to
question is Nicole Cormier with Accessibility Advantage, and I'm just asking for clarification on two of the topics you mentioned earlier. One question for each of you. The first one being, anytime within the previous 12 months you've had employees of more than 20 employees. So one of the organizations I might be consulting with is an organization that during the winter months they have about 15 employees, and during the summer they have about 300 or 400. So you gave me the impression that it's at any time during the last 12 months, whereas I've heard others say that during the time when they have the 400 employees, they comply with the standard, and during the time when they're under 20, they have the option to be more flexible. So can you clarify that one before I ask the second question?
Sure thing, thanks, Nicole. If at any point in the 12 months prior to your filing a report on the online system we have, if you're over 20, it counts for the whole 12-month period.
The second part of the question is you had mentioned with regards to older buildings, and you used the example of a 100-year-old museum. But I just wanted to clarify that that does not mean that they're grandfathered in all ways, that the Ontario Human Rights Code would still apply if somebody asks for accessibility. Is that correct?
We can always speak to the AODA, to the Human Rights Code. Being separate legislation, in some cases it places a higher threshold for accessibility and equity, but that would be addressed through a separate mechanism for the commissioner or the tribunal as appropriate.
And is that information you're going to be providing free information on the Ontario Human Rights Code along with the other guidance tools?
We do a little bit, like our online training on accessibility for people with disabilities as it relates to the code, we'll do that. But at the same time, the commission is truly the keeper of that legislation, and they probably don't want us speaking on their behalf. No, we do work regularly with them in partnership, but they have an entire public education and outreach unit dedicated to that. So we provide information at a higher level, but the more detailed, nuanced information you'll be able to find through the commission.
The other thing with the Ontario Human Rights Code is that it supersedes all other legislation, including our own. So whereas we might set a baseline at what we expect accessibility to be across the province, if a person with a disability found that that wasn't enough for them, they still retain the right to go to the commission and file a case on discrimination grounds. The tribunal would then determine whether the organisation has the means to accommodate the person. The code sets a point of undue hardship for accommodation. So, for instance, if a 100-year-old building were owned by Bill Gates, they might determine that Bill Gates has the wherewithal to actually accommodate the person in the school run. That can certainly happen under the code, though not under our legislation.
Can I also ask, the Intermediate Standards says that training of employees and volunteers needs to include the Ontario Human Rights Code. Is that correct?
It does, as only for parts of the code that apply to persons with disabilities.
So it wouldn't be retroactive in a sense to the accessible customer service standard? Or would it? People had new staff and volunteers coming on. Would they need to incorporate that in their training?
Actually, yeah, so as new employees and volunteers are coming on, the customer service standard is both retroactive and forward-looking. So we encourage people to incorporate training into the orientation or onboarding for these volunteers, as makes sense for your organization. So if you have somebody volunteering maybe 1 hour a month, and you don't put them through an 8-hour volunteer training session, you only train them for half an hour. So maybe you only spend a few minutes on accessibility and you give them a pamphlet or something like that. As it relates to both the customer service standard and the integrated regulation, we have free online modules. Customer service, their training modules are already online for the integrated regulation. We'll have 4 modules plus 1 on the Human Rights Code going live this June, available free of charge to anybody in the province. We'll also have an accompanying slide deck and handouts and a DVD if that's more appropriate for your institution or museum or gallery.
Can I ask you to pick up on Nicole's question? It's just to get maybe more specific. So I have nonprofits that I work with who might have, let's say, 5 employees most of the time,
two level log schoolhouse and school building and housing they put into them. Now they're only open for like 2 hours a week, 7 weeks of the year. No one knows what the internet is on that volunteer board. There's no electricity at the building. How can they be accessible? What would be their best shot in order to be accessible to the population?
Yes. No electricity. It sounds like they're not accessible to people.
It's Windows.
The regulation doesn't make you do things. So, for instance, if you don't have a website, you don't have to create one because of this regulation. It's if you already have one, if you're planning to have one, then you need to build your accessibility. Similarly, for that school, the regulation has the requirements in it. It sounds like a lot of the requirements wouldn't apply to the Museum Unit School based on the number of employees. Certainly more burdensome requirements like documenting your policy.
There's no one actually in support.
Okay.
They're just all volunteers.
Oh, well, actually, if there's nobody actually employed, then it sounds like you might not need training.
You don't even know you're going to train. There's no employees.
Right.
And the training's great. Honestly, yeah.
Thank you. Just to clarify, that's a good question. There are some nonprofits that have no staff, and so the legislation basically is broad, pretty much covers everyone, with the exception of 100% volunteer-run organizations, sole proprietor businesses, and independent consultants. Those would be the ones that do not need to comply. Not to say that it's not a good idea to comply. Certainly, if you're an organization engaging independent consultants, not a bad idea to have that part of your agreement that independent consultant has had that training. And the same thing if you have volunteers who are engaging with the public, based on the statistics that we've heard today, are likely a good percentage of them to have a disability. It would be very good training for them to have regardless. But by law, I think that they need exempt. Judge, do you have a few closing words?
I was just going to do a very short plug again for our website up there on the screen, ontario.ca/accesson. If you visit our website, you can sign up for our email list. We promise not to bother you that often. You can actually opt into the standards if you're most interested and get information about those. I think at the most we would send out an email every 2 months. It might be even as infrequently as quarterly. You can also access our Twitter account through our website, our Facebook account, and our YouTube channel. We have entered Web 2.0, the world of Web 2.0, the Twitterverse. If any of you are particularly, if you're really excited and want to share the word of what you're doing in your gallery or in your museum, we're always looking for champions that we can profile in conversations like this, and frankly on YouTube and on Twitter and on Facebook. So give that some thought, and if you're interested in that, speak to me after that. And please by all means check